Welcome back to the Basic Beginners FreeCAD course. I will help you understand the process of modeling real-world objects into FreeCAD, along with practical exercises to help you on the way. In this exercise, we will learn how to combine multiple operations across different planes to develop the features of a more complex model. Understanding the available CAD operations and the features they produce is essential when translating real-world objects into our CAD program. To illustrate this, we'll focus on an example of a mug. Examining the mug, we can see it consists of two main components, the cup or vessel and the handle. Breaking down a subject into components is an essential skill that simplifies the modelling process. We will explore this concept in more detail after this exercise. When examining these component parts of our subject and referring back to our flowchart, we observe that the cup from the top view reveals a circular profile, and from the side the profiles are consistent, but not a rectangle, making a revolve operation the appropriate method to use. The handle, on the other hand, can be simplified by noting that its cross sections remain consistent throughout its length, and that from the side view the shape follows a path. This suggests using an additive pipe operation, also known as a sweep. The two components then can be joined together with some kind of blend. In this case, we will just use simple fillets. So in this exercise, we're going to put that theory into practice. We're also going to learn how to use the Sketch's new offset tool and a little trick with construction geometry to make the build a lot quicker. So I hope you're enjoying this course, and let's get started with our modeling across multiple planes and operations. If you like what you see and you want to donate to the channel, then you can do so via Ko-Fi or Coffee at ko-fi.com/MANG0 or via PayPal at paypal.com/paypalme/DarrenBEstone. I also run a Patreon where you can get early access and additional content, and that's at patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Links can be found in the channel header, on the About page, or in the descriptions of these videos. So we've opened up FreeCAD and we'll start a new document. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the part design workbench, and from here we create a new body and within a new sketch. We're going to pick the XZ plane. So this is looking from the front onto the cup itself. We're going to use a little trick to create the cup. Using the polyline, we'll create our first line, and that's not connected to this point here. You see we've got the auto constraints on, but we're going to come up and use a point on line constraint. And I'm going to come up about 1.5 millimeters from that point. Doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to click once with the mouse pointer. We're going to move across around about 25 millimeters. We see the dimensions there. And you see we get that horizontal constraint kick in. Come up at an angle. And we want to come up to around about 60 millimeters. Now, if you're going off the screen, then you can zoom in and out and also move the 3D view down while you're still sketching. This all depends on the navigation style you got there. So we need to learn those key combinations to make our life a lot easier. So I'm going to come up around about 60 millimeters. You can see it's saying 61.1, that will do. Click, and then we'll come up straight. And don't worry if we come off, we'll add the constraint back in. And we want to go around about 40 millimeters. That's 39.2, but that's fine. And then just move the mouse pointer over to the left and right click to cancel the movement, and then right click again to cancel the tool. Let's add some constraints. So first of all, I need to straighten this one. We'll use the constraint horizontal vertical and add that in. If this one is out as well, we'll use the same tool to correct that. Right click to cancel the tool. I'm going to click on this one and add some dimensions using the dimensioning tool. This will add the dimension that we can move across, click to drop, and we'll type in 40 millimeters for that one. The next one I want to add is a dimension across here. We'll click that and we'll bring this up because we want to get to the center point in a moment, and we'll type in 25 millimeters. Now that's zoom in. And I'm going to take this point and this point and set that to 1.5 millimeters. Zoom out again. Now I'm adding these constraints, and I notice that my marker size, these points here, are a bit small. So I'm going to come up to Edit and Preferences, and let's have a look at the display, 3D view, and the marker size here. We'll increase this, let's say, to 9 pixels. Apply that, and if we move this to the side, we can see what's happened. So these have got bigger, and we can increase the size like so. That's okay. That makes our life a lot easier when dimensioning. The next dimension I want to add is I'm going to hover over this point, click once, and we get the dimension going into the center point, which we don't want. But if I hover over this point here and click, I then get a dimension going diagonal across this line, following the length of this line. If we move over, we get the height. And we click to accept and type in 60 millimeters. We're starting to constrain this down. Now, going back to this dimension I placed in here, let's right click and bring this out. It's 1.5 millimeters away from this point. We'll see the reasons why when we add the offset. So I'm going to add one more dimension now, and we're going to come up to the top. I'm going to select this point and this point. I'm going to do it a different way this time. So I've selected the points first and add the dimension tool. And we'll move this up to the top, click to drop the dimension and set this to 50 and hit enter. So we're fully constrained and we have the sketch for the revolve, but it needs to be walled to create a solid object. This would create a surface which Part Design at the moment doesn't support. The Part Workbench does. So how do we thicken this? Well, we can use an offset. Now to use an offset, we have to select all of these. So we click and drag a selection around these. The trouble is, if we try to offset this now, what we get if we do the offset, that's right click, those lines are selected, and select Offset Geometry. I'm just going to move this and drop the offset. What we've got now, our walled sketch, but we've still got this inner part, which we don't want. That's Control and the Z, that to go back, which is the undo, this one here. And we're going to convert this to construction geometry. Now, what construction geometry is a special piece of geometry that doesn't appear when we close this sketch. So if I close this now, what we get is our sketch. But if I go into it, and I'm going to zoom out to get this on screen, and I'm going to highlight, click and drag a rectangle around all of these lines. This time, I'm going to use this tool here, Toggle Construction Geometry, or we right click and toggle construction geometry. The line has become dotted. Now, if I close this now, it's though our sketch doesn't exist. This geometry is invisible to the operations outside of this. There are operations where we can reference that geometry, but it means that this is not taken into account when we're doing extrudes or revolves. But the good thing about this is that we can take this and create an offset. Let's zoom out and bring this into view, and then highlight, click and drag selection around that. Right click and choose the offset geometry. I haven't clicked yet, but if I move my mouse, that geometry is coming into view. And what I want to do is come over to the left hand side and click the add offset constraint. This will add a constraint to an offset. Now you notice the box is there and we can type in. So I'm going to type in 1.5 millimeters and hit enter. So we've got construction geometry in the center and the offset geometry. If I hit close now, what we'll see is we have our offset geometry in place. Let's go back to that sketch and take a closer look at what's going on down the bottom here. Now, if I zoom in, remember we done this at 1.5 millimeters. So that's the offset. So we're going to have a 3mm offset. And this is the reason why we created an offset here. This 1.5mm. You can see the 1.5mm here to create a 3mm thickness for our mug. And now this sits on this horizontal line here. So our next operation will be a revolve, but we've got a bit of an issue here. And that's this arc. This is beyond the rotation line. So we're going to revolve it around this line here, which is obstructed at the moment by this constraint. Let's drag this down so we can see what's going on. And what will happen, it will leave volume if I use this. So I'm going to click on the arc and delete it. I'm going to use a simple line, create a line, hover over the top point, coincident, and then come down, hover over the bottom point and make that coincident to that. So we've got that in there. Right click to cancel. And you can see we've got some problems here in that this is not connected to that line anymore. So I'm going to take this point and this line and use constraint coincident tool, which is also a point and object constraint. And this can move. So I can take this point and the center point, which is obstructed by our constraints, but that's okay. We've got that there. Use the same tool and we're back in constraint. Let's close that now and see what we have. So we've got this shape here. Let's take the sketch and come up and use the revolve. So we're going to revolve that sketch. Zoom out a bit so we can see what's happened. It's revolved around this vertical axis, which is correct. We can change that if we want. Horizontal axis, which is not what we want. Vertical axis, or the base Z axis, which will be the same. We'll leave that vertical axis. Go around 360 degrees, which is correct, and we hit OK. So now our tip, this little arrow here, this is our last operation, our very last operation that we can see. And inside that's the sketch for the revolve. And we've created the first part of our mug. Let's save this. File, save as, and give it a name. We can now go on and create the handle. During the introduction of this video, we talked about how the handle would be created by using an additive pipe and extruding the profile along a path. For this to work, we need to connect the additive pipe to the main body of the object. So we're looking for something to reference in our sketch. Now there are a number of ways of doing this. If I come into the body and look at the origin, we could sketch upon this plane here, which will be in line with the center of this cup. So create a sketch here, just on this plane, not even connected to anything. Or we could use the same plane and pull in this edge. So we've got this edge here, which we can reference. And also this one here. We can also reference, if I hide the revolve by clicking on it, press the space bar and clicking on the sketch within that revolve. So inside the tree view, this sketch here, let's bring that back. By clicking on it, press the space bar, we can also reference this sketch. And this is the approach we will be taking. Let's hide the origin, make sure nothing's selected, and create a new sketch. Now the origin is shown, we select the XZ plane, which is the same plane as the revolve profile. We can see the sketch in the background. I'm going to use the import geometry tool, or right click, create external geometry, and pull in these two lines. The reason I pulled in both of them is that when we create the handle, we're going to sit it into the middle of this profile. The reason being is this edge here, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's create the path of the handle. I'm going to right click to cancel the tool. Let's use a simple rectangle and place a rectangle so it sits in the middle of that imported geometry. Let's right click to cancel the tool, and I'm going to delete this line here. So this is our path so far. Let's add some constraints. So I'm going to use the dimensioning tool, or right click, dimensions and dimensioning. Set the top dimension, bring this up and set this to 40 millimeters. Let's zoom out and set this one to 30 millimeters. Right click to cancel the tool or hit escape. Let's take this point and this point, select them both and set a vertical constraint. This is the same as taking this line and making them equal. So now we have this open rectangle. Let's add a fillet between these edges. We can use the fillet tool from the menu or right click and create fillet. Now this will preserve the constraints. So the fillet needs 2 clicks. First select the point we want to fillet from and the point we want to fillet to. And that creates a fillet across there. And the same with this side. The starting point sets the size of the fillet. So I've started it there. If I click here, you see how this fillet is a lot larger than this one. Right click to cancel, take the 2 fillets, so they're added to the Hungary selection, and make those equal with an equality constraint. I'm going to take this fillet, and we'll set some radius. Let's use the dimensioning tool again, and we can set the radius here. We'll set it to 6 millimeters and hit enter. Right click or hit escape on the keyboard to cancel the tool. This is now mobile. And as we said, we want to set this into here. I want to allow some customization of where this handle will sit. So we're going to use construction geometry again. What I want to do is create a line that's centered in here. Use the line tool and drop a line, click and place a line. Doesn't matter how long as it's straight, and place a line in here. We'll do the same down the bottom and right click to cancel the tool. Let's come up to the top, zoom in on that line and take this point as the first selection, this point as the second selection. The third point is the one that's going to be placed symmetrical between these 2 points and use the constrain symmetric. That's in the middle now. I'm now going to take this line, and I don't want this showing up, so I'm going to use the construction geometry and click on that. So this is centered now, and it hasn't a length. We'll see to that in a moment. Let's zoom out and do the same with our bottom one. Taking the 2 points, adding them to the Hungary selection just by left clicking on them and then click the center point. Symmetrical constraint, and taking this line, right click and toggle construction geometry. So now I'm going to connect up the handle with these points. So taking this point and this point and using the constraint coincident, and do the same with this point and this point. The constraint coincident. I can now move this up and down in line with those points. I only really need one at the top because we've kept these 2 points in line, but we may have to change this. I'm just going to set this around about here. Again, we'll adjust this in a moment. It's not fully constrained, but that's fine. Let's close and see what we have. So we set up our path. I'm going to hide our Revolve sketch by clicking on it and pressing the spacebar. So we just got the path at the moment. Now we need the profile to create an additive pipe along this path. Let's make sure nothing's selected and create a sketch. Now I want to place this along the plane that's perpendicular to the plane of this sketch. So this will be the YZ plane. Let's click on that. Now this may be a bit counterintuitive. At the moment, the YZ plane isn't in line with this point. So this is where we want to create the profile. We're going to start to learn sketch attachment. The profile I'm going to create at this center point. We'll show you the reasons why in a moment. For that, I'm going to drop down the rectangle and pick the rounded rectangle. So we're going to create a rounded rectangle around the center point. So I've clicked once and I'm going to set the top dimension to 12 millimeters. Hit tab to go to the next dimension and set that one to 12 millimeters and hit enter. We're quite zoomed out, so let's zoom in. And now it's asking for radius for the corners. So that's set this one to 3 millimeters and hit enter. We've got our rounded rectangle. Let's hit escape to get the mouse pointer back or use the right mouse button. And now we want to center this. So I'm going to bring it close to the center. I'm going to take this point and then the opposite point and then the center point here and use the symmetry constraint, which I seem to have lost on my toolbar. So I'm going to right click and use constrain symmetrical. That's close. So now what we've got is our path and profile. I want to sweep along that path to create volume. At the moment, these are disconnected. Our last sketch was the profile. So I'm going to right click and rename that to handle profile. This sketch here, rename that to handle path. So we have our two objects. Click on the handle profile in the tree view. And if we look down on the data tab, we can see the attachment support was the YZ plane that we selected. And the map mode at the moment is flat face. If I click in the field, we'll see a button appear on the end. Click that button, we have the attachment properties, which we can adjust. So if we look, we have plane as the attachment. YZ plane is plane face. So it's sitting on that plane face. So it's been orientated on that plane face. Clicking into the field and highlighting the YZ plane and hitting backspace on the keyboard, you can see reference 1 has become available. We click that, we can now select another reference. I want to zoom in and select this vertex on the front here. This moves the profile onto that vertex, but we can see we've got an error. But this is fine because what we need to do is select reference 2. Click that and then select the line. This gives us a second reference. We see that the attachment mode has failed because at the moment we've got plane by 3 points. What we want to do is select the normal to edge. This makes the normal of this sketch in line with this edge. So the normal vector of a sketch, bring this down, points away from it because it's a 2D object. So with this sketch here, the X will be running this way, the Y will be running this way, and the Z, which will be the normal vector of the sketch, will be running this way. Notice that the X and the Y of the sketch differs from the X and the Y of our global coordinates. And that can be a little confusing, but we'll cover that in a future video. Now this is set up, let's hit OK. We can see that we have a recompute that needs doing. Just hit the refresh and everything's fine. So we've positioned our profile on the path. Let's bring back our revolve, clicking on it and pressing the space bar, and we can see how that sits. Now notice the profile is above the lip. So this is the reason why we added the construction geometry in here and didn't constrain it down. So if we go back to the handle path and double click it, we can see we can move this down. And I'm going to move it down about this far. And what I'm going to do, come out to the model, come into the revolve, press the space bar so we can see what we're doing in here. And the other thing we can do is come into the handle profile, press the space bar on that, and we see as we've moved that down, this is out of place. So I hit the refresh at the top, and that will move it down, and we can get an idea of where this is going to sit. Let's hit the refresh. So once I'm happy with that, it's below the lip. I could lock in this length here if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave it as it is for the time being. I'm going to make this one here slightly bigger. I want to show you something that will make our next operation after this one fail. I'm going to set this to around about 35 millimeters. So I'm happy. Come back to the task tab and hit close. So now this is positioned. I'm going to come into the revolve and press the space bar so we can see that there. So the next operation we've got to do is the additive pipe. First select the profile from the tree view. If I hover over it, we can see it's embedded in the cup. Come to the top and we want the additive pipe. If I select that now, the profile has been added to the object, and now we need a path to sweep along. So we can add an edge, but we're best to add the object itself. Click on object and select the path. The whole object has been added. This means that any amendments to that path will be reflected back in the additive pipe. Let's hit OK. We've now added the additive pipe to the cup. But if we look at this point here, we can see that the curvature of the mug and this slope that goes down here makes this sit above the cup itself. So it's not connected properly. And this will make any fillets fail. If I try to add a fillet to this edge, let's take this edge here and click on fillet, then you can see it's coming around, but it's falling off the edge. And if I increase this, it will fail when it tries to come round this corner here. And this is one of the reasons why fillets will fail. Let's cancel that. And we need to fix the additive pipe and embed it further into the object. The additive pipe is here. Open this up, double click on the handle path. And let's take a look to see what we can do. So at the moment we have this centered at this point here. So at the moment, if we think of what's happening, let's come over to model and click on the additive pipe and press the space bar and click off. And we need the section view to see what's happening in there. We can see that this point is in line here. So this is where the path stops and also where the profile will stop. So we need to pull this further this way. Let's click on the additive pipe and press the space bar. Come back to the task. At the moment, we've got two constraints that will stop us from doing this. One constraint keeps this point and this point in line, and the other constraint makes this point symmetrical with these two. So we've got to delete both of those. So if we look, we've got the constraint here, this vertical constraint. If we click on it, it's saying 6. If we click on it, it highlights on the left hand side here, or we can find it in here looking for constraint 6. Let's hit delete. That's our first one gone. The next one we want to get rid of is this symmetrical constraint. For the moment we can move this up and down, and now left and right, because we got rid of that vertical constraint. We want the symmetrical constraint in here. So I'm going to select it from the left hand side. Let's find it in here. If I click on it, it will highlight. So it's constraint 18 and delete. So let's add the vertical constraint to this one using constraint vertical and horizontal. So that's in there now. And we can decide where this is going to go. And I'm very tempted to connect it to this line here. but we have to be careful of exiting out the other side. So I can take this point and place some distance in there if I wanted to, or that's just delete this and connect this point to this one with coincident or point on line constraint. And let's see how this fares. Let's hit close. We can see that we are now embedded within there. And the thing that we need to check if we come round is that we haven't come out the other side, which we haven't. We've still got some adjustment to do on the lip here. And that's probably because if I double click on that path, is that we set this to 35mm. Let's double click on that and set that back to 30. So we've got that one in there. Let's set the height of this line, dimensioning tool, and we'll set that to 5mm. Right click to cancel. We may need to adjust this, and let's hit close. So we're off the top edge there. Well, just. Do some amendments and hit close. Now we can add some fillets. This will blend the handle into this cup. To do that, I'm going to select this top edge here. So this curve that comes round, we'll click on it and we can use the fillet tool. Or part design, apply dress up feature and fillet. We can see edge 18 has been added. Let's click on the select. It will change to preview and let's select the other edge here. Click on the preview and we see those fillets have been added. And we can adjust the fillets to whatever size we want. That's enough for me. 4mm fillet and hit OK. The fillet has been applied and we now finished our mug. And we learned how to create two operations and connect them together. This creates a single body and our finished object. Through this exercise, we applied our theory and introduced the idea of simplifying a subject by breaking it down into its component parts. In the next section, we'll introduce visualizing the composite subject as layers, preparing us for the next exercise where we'll expand our skills in FreeCAD. If you like what you see and you want to donate to the channel, then you can do so via Ko-Fi or Coffee at ko-fi.com/MANG0 or via PayPal at paypal.com/paypalme/DarrenBEstone. I also run a Patreon where you can get early access and additional content, and that's at patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Links can be found in the channel header, on the About page, or in the descriptions of these videos. I thank everybody that's donated so far. It really helps to keep the lights on so I can produce more content and also expand the channel. Thank you for liking, commenting and subscribing to these videos, and I hope to see you again in the next one.